Certainly the character who seems to have the most ferocious integrity. Even if his politics are completely mad, he has this ferocious moral integrity that has made him one of the most popular characters in the book. And obviously that ferocious moral drive and integrity, that was kind of my take upon Steve Ditko. Somebody had been interviewing Ditko and had said, have you ever heard of this book, Watchmen? And he said, what's that? And they said, well, it's got this character in called Rorschach. And he said, oh, yes, Rorschach. He's like Mr. A, except he's insane.
Most of Ditko's fans found the character of Mr. A a tad extreme, and I suspect that many were shocked to realise that Ditko's politics were somewhat different to their own.
Kids, meaning teenagers, college students, who were eating up Marvel Comics at that time, did not want to be told, you can either do it the right way or you're wrong. Young people don't like to be told that they're wrong, and Steve was being too stern for them, and he lost them. And he never got it back.
Steve Ditko's return to mainstream comics and more obviously commercial characters came in 1968 when he joined Marvel's biggest rivals, DC, and served up two typically offbeat new creations, The Hawk and the Dove and The Creeper. The Hawk and the Dove seems to be an attempt by Steve to dramatise the two opposing sides of the debate over the Vietnam War.
The Hawk side of the equation is perhaps a little bit non-intellectual, perhaps a bit headstrong, but he's a big, rugged, can-do action hero. The Dove half of the equation is a simpering, effete character in a lackluster blue and white costume. And all he does, he doesn't get into fights, he stands around and agonises about the need for violence. It was obvious where Ditko's sympathies lied in the equation.
He then baffled everyone with a creation known as the Creeper, a superhero with strange powers.
Basically, the only thing that the Creeper had going for him was his freakishness. He just used to sort of jump around in a yellow and green and red garish costume, laughing. And this seemed to be his major superpower, that he could laugh at will.
While other publishers allowed Steve to create odder and odder characters in the hope that he would lay another golden egg, Marvel went on to enjoy monumental success on the back of Spider-Man, not only from the comics, but more importantly, the licensing of films, games and toys. Doctor Strange, look, you see, and even there, even after this time, in the background there, that Marvel Masterwork pin-up is a Steve Ditko. So this is a toy now in the year 2007. Maybe this was from 2 years ago or something. And it's a clearly Ditko-influenced design and artwork. And look, does he get his name on anywhere? No. That's not fair. More often than not, the writer, in the case of both Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, that writer was Stan Lee, who was also Marvel Comics editor-in-chief at the time, received more or less full credit for the characters. But recently, fans have come to realise that things weren't that simple. If his only contribution to Spider-Man's world had been the costume, then Ditko deserved the credit, but it was much more than that. In fact, in the case of Doctor Strange, it was everything.
There does exist a hardcover anthology of Steve Ditko called Marvel Visionary Steve Ditko, and in the introduction it prints a postcard that Stan Lee had sent me, which I gave to the comic reader, saying that we've got a 5-page filler coming up in Strange Tales. Nothing great, but we might be able to do something with him. It's by Steve Ditko. It's called Doctor Strange. 'Twas his idea. 'Twas Steve's idea. That's a quote. And Marvel have even printed it. So we now know for sure that was Steve's idea.
I mean, Steve Ditko, as far as I understood it, has lived in some very reduced circumstances throughout his life. When Marvel have been raking in money hand over fist with characters that he created or co-created, but which essentially, in my heart, were Steve Ditko creations. When I was with a local band that we'd put together about 10, 15 years ago now, called The Emperors of Ice Cream, we had this song called Mr. A. It was the main chorus was a shameless rip-off of Sister Ray by the Velvet Underground. But the verses, I thought they were quite memorable. Would you like me to give you
would we?
a performance,
Come
Jonathan?
on, let's have this. This is gold.
He had one room above a thrift store. He had a trunk of books by Ayn Rand. He was short-sighted and reclusive, resisting pleas to take his photograph. He drew a superhero comic. He saw the world in terms of black and white. He said a day's work for a day's pay. That is our one and only right. He takes a card and shades one half of it in dark so he can demonstrate to you just what he means. He says there's black and there is white, and there is wrong and there is right, and there is nothing in between. That's what Mr. A said.
In trying to uncover the facts in this strange case of Steve Ditko, master of the comic arts, one other name occurs again and again. Stan Lee, or Stan the Man, as his credit on some of the most successful and influential comics in the history of the medium read. For many years, he was considered the sole creator of such fabulous and lucrative characters as the Hulk, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and of course, the Amazing Spider-Man. Now, Stan himself did very little to clarify or correct that assumption, and it's only comparatively recently that his co-creators have got anything like the credit they so clearly deserve. To be fair, Stan's always been the showman, and he's even gone on record to jokingly remark that he'll happily take any credit that isn't nailed down. But I'm still intrigued to find out what he remembers about the early days, and whether or not he believes that Steve Ditko deserves to receive that credit as the co-creator of Spider-Man.
We've just landed at the film star's own terminal, Los Angeles Airport. It's a new world we've arrived in, and surprisingly not an expensive one, because the fabulous sunshine and the fabulous sights, at least, are completely free. Just study life at street level, California style, where the whole flavor of the place hits you in the eye as you drive into town.
Hi, my name is Stan Lee, and I was the head writer, editor, and art director at Marvel Comics for many years. I thought up the Fantastic Four, and it did well. So we did another book called The Hulk, and then we did Spider-Man and the X-Men, and on. And, of course, on the seventh day, I rested.
Now, it would be easy to make Stan Lee out to be the villain of the piece, but I can't bring myself to do that, not least because it would be unfair. He co-created all of these characters. He wrote some of the greatest Marvel comic books of all time, and the fact that he takes the credit for doing so is absolutely right. I just wish that he would share it out with the guys he worked with a little more.
Steve and I worked beautifully together. I think, as far as I was concerned, he was the perfect collaborator. His artwork was superb. His story sense was brilliant. His continuity, he drew things you thought you were watching a motion picture from panel to panel. I mean, he was a joy and a delight to work with. I was heartbroken when Steve finally stopped working with us. In the very beginning, I would come up with a rather detailed plot, tell Steve what it was. He would draw the strip any way he wanted. I didn't give him a complete script. He'd add a lot of things that I hadn't even thought of. And then I would get the pages of artwork, and I would put in the dialogue, trying to give everything and everyone the personality that I wanted them to have. As we moved along, I saw that Steve was so good at story that little by little, I had him come up with most of the plots. I would only say to him something like, hey, let's use sand